Recently, I took a week-long paid vacation from work. That's something I haven't done in a very long time. You see, I get 5 weeks paid vacation a year. I usually just cash them in at the end of the year. That way I have a good amount of money for Christmas. Anyway, paid vacations are just one of the perks for the company that I work for as long as I have. Now, due to company policy, I cannot mention the name of it on any form of social media, but a lot of people that I work with use the code name Snack Kitty, so we'll go with that. Okay? Alright, moving on. Now, I was getting burnt out at work doing the same thing day in and day out. I realized that I needed to get away for a while to clear my head, relax a little, and then go back to work. It did not work out that way. You see, for some strange unknown reason, I've always wanted to get into my car and drive for 3 hours straight, making left and right turns onto random back roads, getting lost, and not knowing where I was. At the end of the 3 hours, I would find the nearest town and stay there for a week, and then use Google Maps to get me home. So I did. After I got off of work the night before I left, I went to the bank and pulled out a couple of $1,000 for a hotel room, gas, food, and to have some spending money. I went to the gas station, filled up, and checked the fluids in the car. When I got home, I packed an old duffel bag full of clothes and a travel bag with my shaving kit, shampoo, conditioner, deodorant, and things of that sort, and put them both in the back seat. The next morning, I woke up, got dressed, and made myself a huge travel cup of coffee, grabbed my wallet, my keys, my phone, and my phone charger, and put them in my pockets, and then headed to the car. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and turned the Bluetooth on, connected it to the car, went to YouTube, and put on my playlist of my favorite creepypastas. You see, I listen to a lot of different narrators, but my favorite is the Riot Horror. He has a very unique voice and reads the best stories. You guys should really go check it out. Anyway, I set the timer on my phone for 3 hours, started the car and put it in drive, backed out of the driveway, and began my journey. The first 10 minutes or so, I knew exactly where I was, as I've driven these roads a million times. But after that, I had no idea. I just kept driving, making random left and right turns. I came up on a road called Dead Man's Lane at about the 2.5 hour mark. It reminded me of that old 50s Jan and Dean song, Dead Man's Curve. I love 50s music, especially the doo-wop music. Today's music just sucks. The 90s and 2000s sucked as well. The late 70s and all of the 80s had some badass rocking songs though. I got into hair metal for a while. Anyway, the 60s and the early 70s were all about drugs, which is something I do not do. But 50s music had it all. It was fun, relatable, rhythmic, and easy to dance to. There are songs about everything. I mean, you're not going to hear a song about a purple people eater nowadays, will you? No, you will not. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yeah, right. As I was saying, I came to Dead Man's Lane at about the 2.5 hour mark and made the right turn onto it. Large dirt fields lay on either side. An old abandoned Gothic Victorian-style house sat in the center of the field, about 2 miles down the road, with a light pole next to it, and that was it. That's kind of strange, I thought. There was nothing else around. I continued past the house and came to the end of the paved road, where it then turned into a dirt road. I stopped the car at the edge. The dirt road ran directly through a large patch of trees. The trees were extremely close to the road, with many branches sticking out over it. It was a small road, barely big enough to fit a compact car through without hitting anything. I contemplated turning around, but turning around was not part of the plan, so I forged ahead. I was glad I took my Chevy Cavalier instead of my Blazer. The branches would have scratched the hell out of that thing. Hell, they were even scratching my Chevy Cavalier. Anyway, the moment my tires hit the dirt, I felt really lightheaded for just a second and then went back to normal. I followed along the road through the woods, hitting every pothole and bump along the way. It felt like I was on a damn roller coaster, for God's sakes. The timer on my phone then went off. I had hit the 3-hour mark. I stopped the car once again and looked around. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, I was a little bit uneasy about the whole situation. I was kicking myself in the ass for coming up with this plan and trying not to piss myself from fear. I mean, I was on some creepy dirt road, surrounded by trees, for which I'm not a big fan of in the first place, in the middle of nowhere with no one around, and to make matters worse, no cell phone service. YouTube cut off the second my tires hit the dirt road, and Google Maps wouldn't even load up, so I could try and find out where I was. Which was weird, because Google Maps always loads up, service or not. No service was displayed in the upper left section of my phone display screen. No service, no bars, nothing. Just great. Well, you got what you wanted, dumbass. Get lost in the middle of nowhere. Great plan, I said to myself. I took my foot off the brake and drove on, hoping to find a town. All these potholes are eventually going to rip out my oil pan and demolish the undercarriage of my car, I thought. And they did, as soon as I passed a large white and blue sign with the words "Welcome to" somewhere on it. The name of the town had been scratched off, so much so that you couldn't even make out any letters. Anyway, I hit the biggest bump I had ever hit in my life as the paved road began where the dirt road in the forest ended, then felt and heard the oil pan being ripped off of the car, and then it hopped a little as I ran over it. The oil pressure dropped. Immediately, the car began to spit and sputter and then died altogether. Son of a gun, I yelled, hitting the steering wheel repeatedly. I calmed down and took a deep breath. I put the car in neutral, got out, and pushed it onto the shoulder of the road. I grabbed my phone, my keys, and my bags from the back seat and began walking. The road that stood before me seemed to stretch on forever. Now, after a few steps, I closed my eyes, still walking, and said in frustration, "How far away is this damn town?" I opened my eyes and continued walking. About 45 minutes later, I saw what looked like a town appear as I topped the hill. I was so excited. Shortly after, I came to the town, walking past a gas station and several storefront businesses. At the end of the buildings was what I assumed to be a town square. There was a huge water fountain in the center with benches and shrubbery surrounding it. I was so hot and thirsty that I seriously thought about dunking my face in the water and getting a drink. I turned around to see this long stretch of road and the faint image of my car on the left side of it. Damn, that was a long walk, I said to myself as I turned back around, staring at the fountain. I put my bags down and began looking at the town. The buildings were old, so were the street lamps. I swear it reminded me of Mayberry from the Andy Griffith Show. But the weird thing about it is that there were no people, no cars, no nothing. It was like the place was abandoned. Suddenly, I heard a loud cawing sound from above me. I looked up to see this huge, and I mean huge, pterodactyl looking bird circling around overhead. It was blacker than the blackest dark of dawn. It flapped its massive wings as it flew through the skies, cawing and looking at me. What in the hell is that? I watched as it swooped down towards me, beak opened wide, eyes bulging, and claws extended. Oh shit! I screamed as I dove into the fountain, its claws missing me by mere inches as it flew back upwards and landed on top of a building marked Town Hall. It sat there, staring and cawing at me. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a truck engine behind me in the distance. I turned my head around to see an old, beat-up, light blue Chevy truck from the 1950s or something come barreling around the corner and heading my way. The cawing became louder and more intense. I ducked my head down in fear as I saw the truck coming towards me. I then heard the sound of brakes squealing right in front of me. "Hey, mister, get in," I heard a deep, raspy voice say. I lifted my head and saw an old farmer-looking guy behind the wheel of a truck. He kind of looked like Uncle Jesse from the Dukes of Hazzard, the TV show, not that crappy movie, complete with a white beard, blue coveralls, and a red hat, only meaner and scarier. "Excuse me?" I said to the man. He looked up through the windshield and looked back to me and said through gritted teeth, "Get in, now," then reached over to the passenger side, opening the door and pushing it out toward me. "I don't know you. I'm not I began to say. "If you want to live, get in," he yelled, interrupting me. For some reason, I looked up at the bird and saw it rise up and begin to flap its wings like it was ready to take flight. "Screw you, bird," I screamed as I jumped out of the fountain, grabbed my bags, threw them in the back of the truck, jumped in, and slammed the door. "Go, go," I yelled to the man. Now, someone, somewhere, must have done a lot of work to that truck because the old man hit the gas and that thing took off like a bullet as he made a left turn onto the road leading out of town. "Hold on," he yelled as he hit the brakes and spun that sucker around on a dime. "What are you doing?" I yelled as the bird landed on the road about 20 feet from the truck and began walking towards it. The old man then laughed. "Watch this," he said as he laid on the horn. I didn't hear anything, but apparently the bird did. It began to shake and convulse violently, causing the most ear-piercing screech I ever heard, whipping its head all around, then falling face first onto the ground, still shaking. The old man screamed out, "One more for the good guys," as he hit the gas. The truck took off and plowed right over that thing. "Yee-haw!" the man yelled as the truck bounced over it. I turned my head to look out of the back window and saw its body roll a couple of times down the street, then exploded into a cloud of gray smoke. I turned back around. Stop the truck. I think I'm going to be sick," I yelled, trying to hold back the vomit. He then made a right-hand turn, heading back the way we came in. Shortly after, the truck screeched to a stop. "Hurry up, there's more where that came from," the old man said. I quickly opened the door, leaned my head out, and threw up for at least a good 2 minutes, then sat back up. "You'll get used to it, son," he said assuringly, handing me an old towel. I gave him a what the hell look, took the towel, shut the door, wiped off my face, and threw the towel on the floorboard. "Used to it? I don't want to get used to it. I want to get the hell out of here, wherever here is," I yelled. "Calm down, son," he said, smiling, patting me on the leg as he hit the gas and rolled on. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Back to camp," he replied. "Camp?" I thought. "How far is that?" I asked. He didn't answer me, so I just let it go. We drove for a while in complete silence through some of the most beautiful farmlands I had ever seen. Suddenly, he pulled the truck over to the side of the road, put it in park, and turned to me, looked me dead straight in the eyes, and said, "Who are you?" in a very intense tone of voice. I began to say nervously, "Where did you come from?" He said, cutting me off again. "No one has stepped foot in that town since the day all this shit began, besides me and a couple of our group, maybe a few others, and that's only to get supplies. You look like you're on vacation or something. You better answer me, boy, or I'll feed you to one of those big flying things. Now talk," he yelled. "My name is Jacob Matheson. I'm from Dover, Delaware. I am on vacation." I drove for 3 hours and came to a road that turned into a dirt road that turned back into a paved road. My car broke down, so I started walking, and eventually I was in that town. I don't know where I'm at. I don't know why I'm here. I just don't know," I said nervously and began to tear up. Not that I was afraid, I was just overwhelmed by everything that had happened. I mean, one minute I'm driving down the road, listening to creepypastas, looking forward to a nice vacation, having a good time, and an hour later, life decided to imitate art, and now I was stuck directly in the middle of one of my own creepypastas. You'd be a little emotional, too. Anyway, "You bullshitting me, boy?" he asked. "No," I said, practically in tears. He just looked at me. "Calm down, son," he said, putting his hand on my shoulder. "I believe you," he said. "My name's Duncan, but everyone calls me Duke 'cause I look like some guy on TV." I smiled, wiped my eyes, and took a deep breath. "So you just showed up here from out there?" he asked. "Out there?" I questioned. "Outside of town limits," he said. "Yeah, I left my house in Dover this morning, and now I'm here." He then gave me a puzzled look. "Dover?" he said. "I never heard of it." "What's the name of this town?" I asked. "I can't remember," he said. "None of us can. All we remember is hearing a loud booming sound as the clock at town hall ran 12 o'clock, and then the attacks began. Those big bastards were everywhere, soaring through the skies, snatching up every man, woman, and child that they can get their claws on. It looked like a damn war zone. My family and I made it back to our farm with a few other families. That's our camp now, while others went in different directions. Our food and supplies ran out quickly, so we had to make several trips into town to get more. That's what I was doing when I saw you. With each trip, we found more and more survivors, too scared to try and get back to their houses or left behind by family members. They were kids mostly. It's really sad. How can a parent leave their kid behind to save themselves? People today are assholes. Anyway, some of them were friendly and agreed to come back with us to the safety of our camp, but some saw us as a threat, fought us, or just ran away. As the amount of people grew, the house became too small to accommodate everyone, so we moved out to the barn. We hunkered down in the barn, running extension cords for electricity to run refrigerators, microwaves, and things of that sort, until the power was shut off. Now we have everything hooked up to a generator, but our supply of gas is about to expire. We've been doing okay, rationing food and drinks, but the supplies in town are running low, and soon there'll be nothing left. I don't know what we'll do after that. For some reason, the birds didn't leave town at first, but now they're starting to venture out. None of us have been able to leave the town limits since all this started. It's like there's an invisible barrier keeping us in. Most people in town were either killed by the birds and carried away, or went their own way, or took refuge at the camp. I'm sure there are still a few out there. We've tried to find a way out, sending several search parties out to try and find a way, but they never returned. My son was in one of those parties. I miss him dearly every day. Now, if you came in, there must be a way out, he said, smiled, put the truck in drive, and began driving again. I just so happened to look out the back window and saw another bird heading in our direction. We got company, I yelled. Duke then looked in the side mirror, hitting the brakes and slowing down to almost a crawl. "What are you doing? Go!" I screamed. "Come on, you big bastard, a little bit closer," he said. The bird began to caw and descend toward us. "Are you crazy? Let's go!" I yelled. Come on, eat this," he yelled, laying on the horn once again, and I heard nothing. I looked out of the back window to see the bird convulsing in the sky, then slamming down hard on the road, its blood exploding from its body as it did. It then burst into another cloud of gray smoke. This time it had no effect on me. Duke then laughed. "That's two for today," he said, smiling. "What's up with the horn?" I asked. "I don't hear anything." "You won't. It's a dog whistle. My son rigged all the vehicles up that way. It kills those things." "How?" I asked. "I don't know, but it does," he answered, hitting the gas and rolling on. "About 4 months ago, well, it feels like 4 months, could be more. I mean, the sun never sets here. It never moves. It's always in the same spot all the time, and we lost all cell service. Anyway, one of the guys in our group let the dogs out to run. He spotted one of those birds off in the distance, so he blew the dog whistle to bring them back. The sound of the whistle must have hit the bird's ears and dropped that sucker like a ton of bricks. It exploded into gray smoke. All the dogs were accounted for, though," he stated. All I could say was, "Wow." Shortly after, we pulled into the driveway of a small rundown farmhouse. We drove past the house and back to the barn. There were several other vehicles and farm equipment parked all around it. There was a young kid, maybe 15 or so, standing on the side of the barn holding a rifle. "Get out, leave the bags, and don't say a word to anyone until I talk to them first," he said to me. "You're an outsider. Gaining their trust won't be easy." I did as I was told. "Stay close," he said, as the young boy turned and began to raise the gun. "Stand down, Thomas. He's friendly," Duke instructed. The boy then lowered the gun. "What's he doing?" I whispered to Duke. "He's on watch, in case one of those big bastards get too close," he responded. We reached the barn, and Duke opened the door. Everyone came forward. He announced as the group of about 15 men and women and about 20 kids of all ages gathered around Duke, as well as the 3 large black dogs. I walked in and immediately heard the clicking of a shotgun being cocked and felt the barrel pushed hard against the side of my head. I froze. "Macy, put down the gun." Someone in the crowd said, "Stranger," she whispered. Macy put the gun down. "We don't have time for this," Duke said to her. I then felt the barrel move from my head. I sighed. I turned to see an 80-year-old plus grandma standing there. "Now listen, everyone," Duke commanded. "This is Jacob. He's a friendly. He's from out there." Everyone's eyes widened. "If he can get in, we can get out," Who's with me? He asked. They all began hooting and hollering. Calm down. We got to come up with a plan, Duke said. Screw a plan. Let's get in the cars and go, someone from the back said. Everyone began yelling again. We can't leave until we know how he got in, Duke yelled. Everyone became quiet at that point. Tell us, Mr. Outside, how'd you get in here? Macy said sarcastically. I just looked at her. I don't really know. I was on a dirt road through some trees. I hit the pavement. My oil pan ripped off. My car died. I started walking and came to that town. I walked past some stores to the water fountain, I said. What dirt road? A woman in the front asked. There's no dirt roads around here. Yeah, there is. My car broke down as soon as I came off of it, I replied defensively. Everyone, calm down. Fighting is not going to help, Duke yelled. Can you show us? He asked me. Sure, I want to get the hell out of here too, I replied. All right, everyone, listen up. Stephen, will you please gas up the vehicles as best you can? Rodney, will you please make sure all the shotguns are loaded and ready to go? Samantha, please take the children with you into the church bus. Jason, will you please take the dogs with you? And Bobby, please make sure all the walkie-talkies have fresh batteries in them and that each vehicle has one. Everyone agreed. I'll take Jacob and Macy with me. Everyone else, please get to your vehicles. No one gets left behind. Let's go, people. Time to roll, he said to the crowd. Everyone then scattered, doing what they were asked to do. About 10 minutes went by. Then, from just outside the barn, we heard Thomas scream, "Incoming!" Then the sound of a shotgun being fired, and the sound of a young man screaming. Several men grabbed shotguns as they all, including Duke and myself, ran out of the barn door to see at least 6 of those big-ass birds flying through the skies and heading towards the barn. One was flying away from us, carrying Thomas's lifeless body in its claws. The men with the guns started firing at the birds. Most of them missed, but a few were direct hits, causing the birds to fall from the skies and smash into the roof of the barn, the vehicles, and the ground, while the men without guns ran to the remaining vehicles and hit the horns. The dogs began to howl, and everyone was screaming. The remaining birds began to convulse in the air once again and exploded into gray smoke as well. All the birds were killed except the one with Thomas's body. That one got away. We've got to go now, Duke yelled. Everyone, let's go. The woman and children then came running out of the barn. Samantha and a few other women helped load the kids onto the bus as the others piled into different vehicles. Well, the ones that weren't damaged. I helped Macy into the truck, then Duke and I got in ourselves. All the vehicles began starting. Follow me, Duke yelled out of the window and took off like a bat out of hell. Dirt and rocks were flying everywhere as the other vehicles piled in behind us. Where are we going, Jacob? He asked me. Go back to the fountain and make a left on the road where you killed the first bird. That's where I was when I first got here. The way in has to be there, I responded. I hope so, said Macy. Me too, I replied. I looked out the back window to see more birds, a lot of birds, at least 50 of them, flying directly toward us, and several men hanging out of the car windows shooting at the birds as we sped down the road. Some were hit, falling to the ground and exploding. The others were soon within whistle distance. Duke then laid on the horn steady. Birds started shaking, exploding all over the place as we barreled through the clouds of gray smoke, finally reaching town. Hold on, Duke shouted as he whipped the truck left and headed for the fountain. Everything was calm, not a bird in sight, but the calmness was cut short when we turned the corner onto the road that led out of town. and went barreling down it. We almost reached where my car was. There were no trees, no dirt road, but what we did see was what I could only describe as Mama Bird standing in the middle of the road. That thing was massive. I mean, it had to be at least 100 feet tall, with a wingspan further than that. Quite a few other birds stood in front of it, stood on it, and on my car. Duke then stopped the truck as the others stopped as well. Holy Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, what the hell is that? Duke asked, no one in particular. It was at that point that I realized that those flying things were just babies. That would be Mama Bird, I said. No shit, Macy chimed in. It lowered its head and stared directly at us. Duke then slowly grabbed the walkie, raised it to his mouth, and said softly, "Everyone, if this doesn't work, I want to thank you all for believing in me. And I'm sorry it had to end this way, but if it does, we're out of here. On the count of 3, stand on your horns and men, aim for its head. Ready? 1, 2. The mama bird then let out this incredibly loud, ear-piercing caw as it and the babies rose up, cawed as well, and began flapping their wings, preparing to attack. 3, Duke yelled into the walkie as he pressed both hands on the horn. Several shotgun blasts could be heard soon after. All of the baby birds began shaking and exploding, but Mama was tougher. She rose to her feet, towering at least 20 feet higher, cawing repeatedly as thick black smoke began pouring from its eyes and mouth. It flapped its massive wings and began to take flight, trying to fly away from us and back to town. Its flight was short-lived, though. As it barely got off the ground, it exploded. But it did not explode into a cloud of gray smoke. No, it just exploded. Pieces of its body, as well as feathers and blood, poured down on the truck and the other vehicles behind us. "Yeah, baby," Marcy said, throwing her fist in the air. Duke and I just laughed. Duke then turned on the windshield wipers to clear off the mess of the window, and then I saw it. The dirt road and the trees. Mama Bird must have been the guardian for the barrier. Things could get in, but they couldn't get out. When the bird died, so did the barrier. The dirt road and the trees are the gateway between two different places in time, I thought. "There it is," I yelled and pointed out the window. "Hurry, the gateway's going to close soon, then we'll all be trapped here." "Well, I'll be," Duke said, putting the truck in drive and pounding on the gas. We slammed down hard on the dirt road and followed it all the way until the paved road started again. The others did as well. Once we hit the paved road, my phone began to ding with notification after notification. Service was back, and I had a full set of bars. Macy's and Duke's phone dinged as well. I looked out of the back window to see that dirt road and the trees were gone. There was just more road. All of the vehicles that were following us just appeared out of nowhere, one right after the other. When the last vehicle was out, we all pulled off on the side of the road in front of that old Victorian house, got out of our vehicles, happy to be out of there. I offered to fill up everyone's gas tank and get them all something to eat and drink. I used Google Maps to find the nearest gas station. We got to the gas station, and I did as I offered. We all stood there in the parking lot for a while, eating, drinking, and talking. Several of us exchanged phone numbers and promised to keep in touch with each other. I hear from some of them from time to time. Slowly, we all parted ways, headed out in different directions. Samantha said she was going to take the kids to a nearby church to ask for assistance in finding their parents if they were still alive. I talked to her about a month ago. She told me that she won the lottery. bought a big house, and decided to keep the kids. Jason took two of the dogs with him, while I took one with me. I decided to call him Diesel. I talked to him a couple days ago, and he ended up in California, got a job, and opened up an animal rescue facility. Rodney sent me a message on Facebook a while back and said that he went to Tennessee and became a country western singer. The others are doing good as well. Anyway, I asked Duke and Macy if they would like to stay with me, as I have plenty of room at my house. They agreed, and I used Google Maps to get us home. I gave Macy, Duke, and Diesel a tour of the house. Macy and Duke decided to try and get some rest and went to lay down in the bedrooms they chose. I have 4 bedrooms, fully furnished. Anyway, I took Diesel with me to the kitchen and put on a pot of coffee, turned on the TV, and sat down on the couch. Diesel jumped up beside me. The TV channel that I had on last time I watched just so happened to be showing the Alfred Hitchcock movie, The Birds. I turned it off immediately and just hung out with Diesel, playing in the yard and drinking coffee. Now, the weirdest part about this whole thing, if what happened wasn't weird enough, is that I left my house at 7 o'clock Sunday morning, drove for 3 hours, spent maybe 2 hours in that town, drove back maybe 20 minutes to the gas station. Once we got out, spent an hour eating and talking and another 3 hours to drive home. That would mean I should have gotten back no later than 5 o'clock Sunday afternoon, right? Well, when we pulled in my driveway, I shut off Google Maps and locked my phone. I then decided to check the time, and yeah, it was a little before 5, but the date underneath wasn't Sunday. No, it was Wednesday, 4 days later. I went back to work on Monday, and everyone asked how my vacation was. I just told them it was quite an adventure and left it at that. I called my insurance company and had them remove my Cavalier from my policy, as there was no way in hell I was going to get it back. Hell, I didn't even know where it was. I drive my Blazer now. Now, in closing, I'd just like to say again, if there's one thing that I've learned from all of this, is that I'm never taking another vacation, ever, again.